that, and because there's going to come a spot that we're going to close the roster, and so then those of you that are covenant members, that kind of closes it. So Randy Murrah, our deacon board secretary who keeps our minutes, all right, is going to come and just share the minutes from last year's annual meeting. So, Randy, if you wouldn't mind doing that.
I'd love to. Okay, so last year our meeting was on 2/20. Okay, last year our meeting was on 2/23 of 20. Pastor Jim opened the meeting with a call with a prayer and devotions. The minutes were read and approved, as we will do today. Motion was made by Tracy Lindberg, second by Lee Harris, to accept the minutes as read. There was no discussion, and the motion passed. Moving on, we had a brief discussion concerning a change to the wording of the bylaws to change the word from men to people, so as not to infer that only men could be deacons. A motion to accept that change by Pam Schrupp and seconded by Val Anderson. No discussion, and the motion passed. Then there was a motion made to close the roster, made by Tina and second by Scott Johnson. Motion passed. The two candidates put forward by the deacon board that were voted on were Carter Ash and Chris Monroe, and both persons were approved. During that process, there was a voting anomaly that occurred. We had an extra vote. We had to work through that. And actually, a revote we decided would not change the outcome, and a motion was made to accept the anomaly by Pam and second by Sarah Pluger, and that motion passed. There was a motion made to certify the election and destroy ballots by Scott Johnson, second by Tracy Lindberg. Motion passed. The financial report was given by Paul Kuhn. A few questions were asked and answered. Motion to accept the report as given by Joyce Hallam and the second by Sarah Pluger, and that motion passed. Then, with no more new or old business to attend to, a motion to adjourn was made by Chad Pluger and second by Ron Brown, and the motion passed. And that was the minutes.
All right, I'd like to entertain a motion to accept those minutes. Okay, and if you don't mind saying your name, and I'll repeat it. Okay, so motion by Lee Harris, because Randy's going to need these too. I don't know if you want to write on. Motion by Lee Harris, second by Scott Shirk. Any further discussion? All in favor of receiving the minutes? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Awesome. Who knew that our little voting anomaly was going to be multiplied significantly when it came to the election for president, huh? Yeah, just, hey. Ooh. All right. Pastor Tina, I actually signed in for you already. It's a voting anomaly. Yeah. I didn't take ballots for you, though, so I'm not going to vote for you. Pastor's report, if you would grab your annual report. We don't do reports from each of the departments, that sort of thing. But if you would grab your annual report, if you don't have one, you can see them up here. But, one of the things I would encourage you to do is to read through this. Take it home, read through it. There's some great information. We're going to hear some more. You heard a little bit about what's going on with Speed the Light and the youth, giving over $170,000 in the course of history and where we stand in the nation. Wasn't that just awesome? I didn't know that. All of a sudden, it's like, wow, I didn't know that. But there's some vision. There's some information from our deacons. I'm going to have our deacons, if they wouldn't mind, just standing up, okay? And so you can kind of see who they are. You probably know who they are. But these are our deacons, and they have served faithfully. Some of them have served faithfully for 3 years and have indicated they're willing to serve some more, which so it must not be too bad. And I know Vonnie is going to be going off, and Vonnie, we just appreciate you so much, and thank you for serving. And we just let's give these folks a hand. And yeah. And you know what? They've faced something as a leadership team that nobody's ever faced before, in the world. So in the way that they have helped us navigate through this has been tremendous. I think our church body is doing something's happening in our church body that I did not expect, but I can tell you this, in the last 6 months, I believe since we've been in the building, we've had more guests come into the church in the last 6 months, in that 6-month period, I think, than we've seen since we moved into the building. It is just amazing. This morning I met, again, some more first-time guests who were invited by their children who were first-time guests 2 weeks ago, okay? And they said, hey, you got to come check this church out. And here they were. They're saying, yeah. So anyway, that's just, this leadership team is just amazing. And I appreciate each one of them. And I know Pastor Tina appreciates, the staff appreciates their support and just their undergirding of decisions that we make and together as a team. So as you work through the report, you'll see all of the different things that are in there. I don't know, unless you have a question on something, I'm not going to particularly read those pieces of the report, other than we're going to get to the financial piece, and then we'll go through that with a little bit more time. Anybody have any questions on the report? I know it's a lot of information. You just got it today, and it's, I don't know, how many pages, Pam? Like 40 or something? 25 pages, okay. And it's, just so you know, it's on our, Paul has worked and got a new copier. We have we don't buy new stuff, a used copier, but it is a color copier that staples and all of that. And so these are the first reports run on it. Isn't that nice? Yeah. So we're able to run them through in color and also have the copier staple them. So we're just moving into the 18th century, which is awesome. And I'm holding us back sometimes. So anyway, All right, I just take a motion to receive the church report. You have it in your hands. You'll be able to, you may or may not agree with all of it, but that we have a report and you're getting it. All right, so Walter Hallam with a motion. Do we have a second? Okay, Ben Vanderweist with a second to that. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye. Opposed, same sign. If you come across anything in that report that you do have a question about, you can contact anybody in the office or any of the deacon board members and just say, hey, what does this mean, or what's this, that kind of thing. Any of us can do our best to answer the question or point you to the person that can answer it, okay? So at this point, we're going to move to close the roster. Have all covenant members signed in? Have all covenant members signed in? All right. Do all covenant members have 3 ballots and no more than 3, and they're all different colors? Okay, check that, and everybody should have. All right, anybody else? Just we're going to do that, and then there probably are some people down in Life Hall, and cleanup and that kind of thing, but I'm not sure if there's any covenant members left down there or not. That's a possibility, but we're going to continue to move here, and they have graciously agreed to serve down there, so we appreciate them. And all right, a motion by Scott Johnson to close the roster. Do we have a second? All right. Okay, so Scott Schuler, got a second from Scott Schuler. Okay. Roster is, we got a second. Any further discussion on the roster? All in favor of closing the roster? Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, we're going to go ahead and vote at this point. And so if you guys would tally our number of covenant members, and they're going to do that. And then this is, again, important that you've signed the roster. You don't have more than 1 ballot in each of the areas. We're first going to vote on our deacons. And so, yep, we got pens up here. If you need a pen. Yes. Somebody did point that out, and so it's the green ballot that says February 29th. If you would take your ballots and change that date to February 28th, that would be awesome. At the end of all of this, we're going to destroy these ballots. But that is something that we just appreciate you reminding reminding me of that, and that's just something that there's no 29th this year, is there? Okay, all right. So that would be interesting. All right. So take out your yellow ballot. Do we have a roster count? Oh, okay, they're doing that. So they're doing that. Your deacon ballot has 3 names on it, okay? And so does anybody have any question about our deacon process, nomination, election, ratification? Does anybody have any questions about that? Because I'd be more than happy to answer what our process is. Otherwise, I'm going to give you the umbrella approach, all right? And so here's what happens is that when we have an open deacon position, all of the eligible that meet specific criteria, covenant members, are placed into a pool of people, okay? And so there's like 10 criteria. If they miss in any of them, then they're not placed in that pool. It's very objective type of criteria, like do they regularly attend church, okay? So we want people who are here to be in our pool, all right? And so that's just one example. And so that pool then is forwarded to a nomination committee. And the nomination committee is made up of 2 covenant members, 2 board members who aren't going off, and myself, and we review that list, and we narrow it down if necessary for the deacon board, and we narrow it down on any kind of other information that we might have, okay? And so like this year, for instance, we had one position that was open, which our bylaws require us to have a position as what we call a deaconess. We want to make sure that there's always representation of the ladies, and it doesn't mean we can only have one, but we need to have at least one if there's somebody eligible, willing to serve, and qualified. Okay, because if there isn't somebody eligible, willing to serve, and qualified, it remains open. So we had, Yvonne, do you remember, did you sit on the committee? Did we have like 21 ladies that were in this pool? I mean, that is phenomenal. We've never had numbers like that of eligible people that met that first criteria. It's just phenomenal. Our church growth and discipleship is for sure in the ladies, guys. I don't know. We didn't do the guys at this point, but and so we took that list of 21 and narrowed it to 7, and then those 7 were contacted to see if they would be willing to serve. And of those 7, there were 3 ladies that were willing to serve. And so those 3 ladies were forwarded to the deacon board, and we go through another level of process to determine whether or not there would be 1 or 2. And if there's 2, we put them in a hat and draw them out. And so, I mean, we kind of wrangled over this, all of that. And at that point, what happened was there was one that kind of, I think, rose above the others in the sense of the process and said, okay, we've been praying about it. This is the person that we're going to select this year to be on the ballot. That's what it is. Okay, so this is the election, and that's what's being presented to you. And we do this for this reason. We don't ever want this to be a political process. It eliminates the politics of being in a meeting like this and saying, hey, here's 2 people, now vote on them. Okay, I just think that's ugly because nobody's going to feel good about it when it's done. Just isn't. And so that's our process. Last year we had a couple of names, or it seemed like it was last year we got to a spot where we put 2 names in a hat and drew one of them because that's a part of the process too that could happen. So anyway, that's the process in a nutshell. Those names are here, and you vote on all 3 of these, okay? You don't just vote on one of them. You vote on all 3. There's 3 open positions, and Randy and Lee, who have been serving and were qualified previously, said they would be willing to continue to serve. You can serve for 3 years consecutively, 2 terms, and then you have to go off for at least 1 year, okay? And so that's the length of service you can serve. And so they were willing, 2 3-year terms, yes. And so they were willing to continue to serve. They had already been vetted. It didn't make sense for us to continue to process additional names at that point because we had people that were already willing to serve that met the criteria. So, all right, that give you enough time to do your counting? 45. So if you got a sheet, if you can just keep that sheet, all right. And so go ahead and vote. And because these ballots are different colored, I think we're going to go ahead and we're just going to collect them, and we don't have to worry about them getting mixed up or anything like that. No, just the yellow ones. All right. And while they're doing that and while they're counting, we're going to move into the next piece, which is the bylaw change and an edit to our bylaws. All right. And so that's this sheet here. Okay. Before you have any questions, let me see if I can answer some of them. All right. Right now I'm doing a master's thesis, and what my thesis is on is I'm studying the process of pastoral transition in rural churches in Minnesota, and it's evolved into rural churches like all over, okay? And there's a whole bunch of information about transition in the pastoral role. Let me just share with you what the historical type of transition looked like, okay? All right. This is in typical evangelical churches. This is the traditional process of transition. A pastor submits their resignation or retires, and shall sever all ties with the congregation once that happens. They should not contact parishioners only unless they notify the current pastor and get their approval to do so. The former pastor shall not return to that church unless they receive an invitation. The former pastor should not take advantage of former parishioners by passing through and stopping and staying the night. The former pastor should not pursue relationships with former parishioners after leaving the church. The former pastor should refrain from giving any advice or counsel to the former parishioners. The former pastor should not preach funerals, weddings, or perform any other pastoral ministry for former parishioners, unless the current pastor gives them an invitation to do so. If they live in the same community, the former pastor shall attend another church. Okay? That's the traditional transition. Just so you understand that I've been studying this. And what happens is this: pastors retire or resign, and 2 weeks later, they're never heard from again. And that's very, very typical, okay? So personally, I just believe that that's abusive, and I don't think that that's the way that things should happen. And there's some reasons for it, but I have not found some solid biblical foundation for them. Instead, I've found solid biblical foundation for transition to occur through succession. All right? And so, in other words, all of my study has shown this, both biblically and in process, that there can be a process of transition where the former pastor helps the church through the process of transition or retirement or anything like that, helps them through that process, helps the next person and mentors them into the process. And so there's more of a seamless type of transition that happens. So if any of you are worrying or concerned right now as I talk about this, whether or not we're leaving, we're not leaving, okay? All right, so if that is like, oh, he's talking about this because we're leaving, I can tell you this: at some point we will leave and we will die, okay? One of the authors in one of the books that I read said this: every single pastor that steps into a church steps into the process of transition, because at some point they are going to leave, one way or the other, okay? And so one way or the other, we're going to leave at some point, and it could be through death, but if that's the case, we just hope that's not tomorrow. All right? So there's no transition in our lives in the process, but we believe this. We believe that good leaders should shepherd a church through the process of transition, and that takes time. Okay? This is not a 1 day or a 1 week or a 1 year or a 2 year process. The process of transition, and it's been shown that the process of transition with founding pastors is even more severe, all right? And so this is just something that what we want to do is we want to shepherd the church through that process when it does occur, and that means putting some things in place before that time comes, okay? And one of them is this: we believe that a co-pastor is the best opportunity for a person in transition to step into and then to move through that mentoring process and then be prepared for the time when the pastor leaves or retires. And so this is what it would look like. This is the reason why this is being presented to you today. This is what it would look like. There would come a point when somebody would be brought into a co-pastor role, and what they would do is they would spend, and the bylaws indicate this, they would spend up to 3 years in a mentoring process, at which point the lead pastor, because there still would be a lead pastor with a co-pastor, the lead pastor would resign, and the co-pastor would be elected into the lead pastor role. And it's actually the opposite. The co-pastor would be elected in, and then the lead pastor would resign, is what would happen. And what that allows for is what, and our deacons have all read this book, or at least they've been given this book. It's called Passing the Baton. And the idea is this. In a relay race, in a world-class relay race, the transition zone is the place that the race is won or lost. It's across the board. It doesn't matter how fast your team is. This is all world-class runners. It's won or lost in the transition zone. One person enters the transition zone while the other person is in it. They both run together for a while in the transition zone, and the baton is handed off. And for a little bit, they're both actually holding the baton at the same time. And then the other person takes the baton and moves on. And if it's done effectively, actually what happens in the race is that team gains time on the field. In other words, they move ahead even in a greater fashion. Okay? If the baton is dropped in the transition zone, they're disqualified. That's happened in a lot of churches. Some churches have ended up folding because the transition didn't happen right. Traditional transition might not be the best. And so if the baton's hung on to a little bit too long, it slows the team down. Okay? So you see all of the different analogies to that, but that's kind of the thought behind what we're proposing to you in this bylaw. Okay? Anybody have any questions? Does everybody understand that? Does that? I hope it makes sense. We think it does. There certainly are complications with any kind of transition, but we just are believing that this is going to be something we can set the church up for success in the future at the point that transition might happen or will happen. I don't think might. It just is. How many of you retired from your jobs? Anybody here? Okay. So transition. It happens. It just is the way that God has set up life, and he's also set it up so that it can be something good and not bad. All right. No questions? All right. Then take your green ballot, change the date to make sure you change the date to 28. Do we have anything on the deacon results? All right. So all three of our deacons, so Randy, Lee, and our new deacon, or deaconess, Jenny. Jenny, would you stand? Jenny Vanderweist. Awesome. So Jenny kind of knows a little bit about what she's getting into because her husband Ben was on the deacon board before. So now they get a. It has changed a little bit. I don't know if we've had a meeting that's gone past 9 o'clock, Ben, so I just got to tell you. They used to go to midnight, and Ben is gone, so I don't know if you know who that might have caused that. Well, actually, there's been one other addition, too. Pastor Tina's been sitting in on the deacon meetings, so you don't know this. She has a little bit Scott knows what a shocker is. She has a little shocker under the table when I get going a little bit too long. And so the deacons are like, what is he doing? He's really in the spirit. It's like, that's what it is. Yeah. All right. And we need to wait for the results of that before moving to the next piece, because that needs to pass in order for the next ballot to be needed. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to the financial report. And Paul, those of you heard Carol, passed out. I think she probably fell first is what happened. She did, okay. She slipped and fell and passed out from the pain. She broke her fibula. Okay, so that's what happened. And so they're taking care of her at St. Cloud Hospital. And so thank you for your prayers. Keep praying for her. That is just, not fun for sure. And so our prayers go out to them. So I am going to fill in for Paul. And so if you would turn in your report, if you would like to page 19. Actually, page 18. And so on the top of page 18, what you will see is you'll see that first half of that segment is that based on the size of operation that we are, we do our best to do things that are in alignment with the Assemblies of God and their recommendations, and to divide the accounting responsibilities out in the ways that we can do that. And so Paul sends this word. He says, "Thank you to the deacon board member Scott Johnson for his diligence and integrity as being the treasurer of New Life Church and keeping our accounting records current and complete, and for the length of time that he served in that capacity." So, Scott, I think you've probably served at least 15 years, maybe more. So, almost since the start. He's been our accountant, I guess, is a bookkeeper, does all of the payroll, takes care of all of the deposits, does all the reconciling, all of that sort of thing. So, Scott, thank you. Let's give Scott a hand. Just appreciate you doing that. He does that voluntarily, and so I would say an organization our size, if we had to hire out a bookkeeper and payroll person or that sort of thing, I'm just going to throw a guess out here. Probably at least cost us $12,000 a year. I don't know if that's right. Something like, he knows the hours that he puts in, but I'm going to guess it probably would be something like that. It wouldn't be necessarily full time, but it would be significant. And so, thank you, Scott. And I don't know if there's a way you can get donation credit for 20 years of that or something like that. I don't think so, but you'll have to figure that out. You're the bookkeeper, and then also the Carrs and the Kasners who have faithfully. I know the Carrs started this year, and then the Kasners have continued being our counters and our offering counters. So different people count the offering; they handle it different. Okay, and so just so you know, this is a part of the integrity of the system. So they're our counters. And then Paul. In conjunction with Scott, he oversees, as the executive business administrator of the church, oversees them, both of them. And so that's kind of our process, all right? The next piece is our mortgage and indebtedness update. And so in 2019, we paid off our second mortgage, so we only have our primary mortgage left. It was originally set to balloon this year, but we stepped into some advantageous interest rates and refinanced the existing mortgage. And in refinancing, we still don't change the end term, okay? So we don't refinance another 20 years. We refinance from the point that we're at, all right? So we're continuing to pay that down. I think now we're probably going to have about 15 years left, something like that on our mortgage. And so Falcon Bank has just been a great bank to work with, and we just appreciate them and their work with us. And I know Jenny works there, and so that's been, and we've got great banks. I know we've got other banks, Fransden, we've got bankers from different places, but thanks to Falcon for what they do. All right, there is an assessment recording in 2000. In the year 2000, there was an assessment recorded against the property. One of those is an active assessment that we pay, and then there is a term assessment that will come due and owing in 2030. You can see that. It's about $79,000. There's an assessment that will come due and owing on our other property that we have. We have about 10 acres here and about 18 or 19 acres that has an assessment against it. That's right now, I forget what they call it, but it's in a spot that it's a 30-year interest-free waiting, and our goal is at the time that it comes due that we are going to pay it off, and whether that's from capital or from funds raised, in the year 2030 we're going to pay it off. And so it's now showing and being recorded as a long-term liability in our books. So there's been some changes that Paul and Scott have been working on our bookkeeping. And historically, we ran everything through one main fund. And in most churches, that's called the general fund. But as our growth, the budget's more than tripled in size in the last 10 years. And so we're tracking the operations of New Life through 5 different funds, okay? So that fund accounting is something that's going on. And so that's one of the ways that we're attempting to be more up-to-date in the type of accounting that we would do and fund tracking we would do here at New Life. So our cash activity of all funds, you can take a look at page 19. Our ending cash balance, if you look at the bottom, was $231,000, almost double of what it was in 2019. And some of that, we did receive some payroll protection earlier in the year, and forgiveness has been granted to that. And so our cash on hand is about $231,000 at this point. We are in discussion as a deacon board about setting aside that payment that's due in 2030 of about $78,000, and so we would internally designate that and do some things inside just to say, let's earmark this so when the time comes, we know for sure we have the money to pay that off. And so that's something we're in process with. If you have questions, just holler out. I'm just going to keep going. Page 20. Here's our general fund versus budget, what happened in 2020. So as you look down on the right side, the percentage of the budget that was targeted against that number on the right side is how much of that budget was used. Okay, so if you look at the first one, when it came to salary, housing, and insurance, 95.5% of that budget was used during the year. And that's what all the numbers are as you run down that whole piece. If you look at the music and creative arts area, 190% of the budget, so almost double of the budget. I don't know what Pastor Tina did in that area, but she just was just really a spender. And so I oversee all of the other areas. I mean, and then she has that area, and it just is Spenderella, as the term Scott uses. So, no, that's a smaller budget item, so it doesn't take much to push that over. But at the end of the year, we held back spending. Paul Kuhn has helped us with this and just done some quarterly markers. And initially, after COVID hit, we just reeled everything in and just said, hey, we just really need to be cautious in this area. And so due to that caution, we spent about 6% less than what was budgeted. And so I just appreciate the staff and their willingness to we just basically went back and said, let's cut 10%, and we came pretty close to hitting that mark. Page 21, this is our budget for 2021. And the percentages of that budget that each of those areas account for. Somebody has a question? Who has a question? Oh, yes, Scott. Show me what you're referring to. 6,300 was spent. Yep. Sure. Okay. Here's what I can speak to that is each of the departments submit their budget based on what they're planning to spend, and for the most part, and we say, what is it that you're expecting to spend? I do know that in this area, and the same with all capital expenses, all of those kinds of things, and I would say I understand the question. Those areas where you see some of those kinds of things, I would suggest possibly talking with the people that are in that area and saying, hey, let me help you with this budget as you look at this, what it might be. That's Scott. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. So here's what happens in the way that budget works. Okay, and so, and I've forgotten about the drums, and there was a couple other things, but I think the drums were $5,000, something like that. So that kind of pushed that number around a little bit. And that's one of the things that we do as a deacon board is that if there's something that comes up, and so our drummers had actually been kind of telling us that we needed new drums for a few years, and we just kind of kept pushing it back, and finally we just said we can't do it anymore, and so we bought them. And so, but here's how the budget works for the staff. The staff gets this budget, and they have the freedom to spend inside that budget. Okay, and so we don't go back to the deacon board. They don't come back to me. They say, here's your budget. You have the freedom to spend on those things that you budgeted for. All right, and so they do that. And if there's something that comes outside of that budget that they need money for, then they would come to me, or somebody maybe in their department would come to them and say, hey, we need this. Can we buy it? And so then if it goes over that number, the board or the staff does not have authority to spend over the budget. That's the fiduciary or the financial responsibility is the deacon board to make over that. So the deacon board approves this budget. We spend inside of it. If we're going to go over it, we come and we make a request and say, we need drums, and they're going to be $5,000, and we only have $3,000. What do we do? Okay? And so then the deacon board makes that decision. So they oftentimes will come in and make the argument for that if they need to make it. And I think one of the drummers did that. so okay, so that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek because Chris came onto the deacon board, and we, and I don't want to blame you, Chris, but sometimes some things need a voice, and so we heard the voice, okay, and so that's that's good. But Scott, if that answers your question, I think the ongoing, and we have this issue with we're 5 years in now. We're going to have this issue with a lot of different things. You saw on the projector the other day. The bulbs were going out, and they were good. They're good for, like, Andy, 3,000 hours or something like that, and they had 3,200 hours on them, okay? And so they need to be changed. Now, I'm thankful that over time some things go down in cost. It takes 2 light bulbs. Those bulbs were $600 originally, and they came down to $120. So that was in 5 years, some of that stuff's dropped. So just so you know, I mean, those are, yeah. Yep. Yep. So in beginning of October, all of the staff are told that their budgets, is it beginning of October, right? Their budgets are going to be due by the end of October. And then the end of October, they come to me and to Paul, and we go through them just to see, okay, like every year Mindy puts in there a Ferris wheel that costs like $10,000, and we say, okay, that's out, Oh, 5, it's down to 5. Okay, everything comes down, That's one that doesn't have insurance. So, $10,000 with insurance, 5 without, So she'll put that in there, and we'll say, you know what, this year we're not going to have a Ferris wheel. Okay, I'm using a tongue-in-cheek example, but it's a true example. So Paul and I will go through it at that point, and then Paul will meet back with the staff during November and then talk through that budget to make sure they understand. And if they have an argument for something that they want to spend or feel is necessary in ministry, they'll make that argument with Paul, and then all of that gets done. And then after that's done, Paul and Scott Johnson and we meet to make sure that the budget is in line to be presented to the deacon board in December. Okay, so we do that during the month of November. And then in December, the budget for the most part is being in its finalized form to be presented to the deacon board. And the deacon board gets that initial budget in November. They have a month to review it and to look at it if they desire to do that. And then in December, then approval is necessary before the end of the year. So we approve that in December. So it's October, November, December. Those 3 months are the 3 segments of what we do with the budget, how we handle it internally. Yeah, good question. Okay. Let's move on to the last page. And this is the missions fund. We have a missions committee that was created, and the missions department now or committee is going to be handling their own budget, and they're in process with that. Let me highly recommend, if you haven't signed up for the missions banquet, to sign up before you leave. I think it's about half full right now, and we have to limit attendance because of some COVID stuff. And so get signed up. I don't want you to miss it. It's going to be phenomenal. This is like the missions budget. You know, missions gives, if you look in this report, you'll see that last year in missions, we gave $76,000 to missions. That came out of our books towards missions. This is the budget, okay? In other words, the budget's going to support this, even though there's more that's given than this. That just kind of comes in and goes out. Like Speed the Light, the youth raised $25,000. We don't budget $25,000 for Speed the Light. In fact, we don't budget anything. We just say, you know what? What's given is going to go to Speed the Light. And so they gave $25,000. That's how it works, so you don't see it in this number. So there's what's called legacy missionaries, and those are missionaries that the board has, over time, has approved and brought on and that sort of thing that were given to the missions committee. Some of the purpose of the missions banquet and raising money is to give the missions committee some funding in order to be able to bring on new missionaries or missional agencies. You know, there's different missional agencies that we support, Rum River Life Choices. And so I think we recently took an offering and sent them a check for $1,000. And so that just is something, you know, an offering was like $750, and then the missions board said, let's add $250 to it and make it $1,000 even. That just sounds like a good number. So that's how that worked. So that's that. And then the historical growth percentages, I'm just going to talk a little bit about 2020. It's kind of a weird year. Our general fund tithes and offerings, which we can operate with, went up, about $40,000 during COVID. I mean, God has blessed us. It's just as in our attendance, we're trying to track our attendance with online. Just so you know, our online audience, we've estimated our online audience on the weekend to be somewhere between 150 and 180 people, depending on what's going on. We have 50 viewers, not like clicks, but people viewing either Facebook and YouTube connected together, okay? And when we say 50 people, we say 50 families, because we know that there's some families. In fact, I know Vonnie and Sean and their 3 kids. One viewing represents 5 people. And so what we've gone through is we've tried to go through and look and see what the viewing is and what the number would equate. And we did a study. I don't remember what it was. It was about 8-week study of who's watching. How many families does that represent? I know Carter and Kayla, and they watch sometimes online, and their families and their grandma, and different, and so we've tried to do that, and we've come up with this number as we look at it, what each viewership represents from New Life. And I don't remember what it was. It was like 2.7 or 3.1 people. And so as we look at the viewing, we multiply it out by that factor to put our online attendance for that Sunday there. And each Sunday we have a pastor that monitors our online audience. Pastor Tina did this morning, and she's interacting with them, and if there's any interaction, she's providing for our online audience some interaction if they have questions or that sort of thing. So she's doing that right now, and so with our annual meeting. So that's the financial report. Any other questions on the financial report? All right, I would take a motion to receive the financial report. All right, Troy Killinger with a motion to receive the report. Do I have a second? Carter Ash with a second to that. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, bylaw change. Bylaw change met the criteria for it to be passed, and so as a result, Deacon Lee, he's still a pastor. Pastor Lee is credentialed, and so, and he pastored here probably over the course of 12 years in a row. And so for me, if you hear me interjecting that sort of thing, because as soon as he comes up this way, it's like, hey, Pastor Lee's coming. I mean, that's my frame of reference, okay? And so he's on the deacon board, and we just appreciate you doing this. And yeah, all right. So still serving. I'm going to let you take this from here.
All right, so we have one last vote that we're doing, and we are, now that the bylaw change has passed, we are actually going to receive the vote now to vote for Pastor Tina, yes or no vote to become the co-pastor for New Life. And just as a frame of reference, she's been a part of this church since literally day one, and has served for many, many years and has sacrificed probably more than anyone because she has to deal with Jim. Hey, you throw people under the bus, man. If you can't take your own medicine, then... So I would ask you guys to go ahead and take your vote, or vote now, and then bring them up, and I'll have Randy and Troy count the vote. I'm not stuffing ballots. No, last count. Pastor Tina, I take checks for the extra ballots. All right, and with the vote counted, we do have a more than 2/3 majority, so Pastor Tina has now been elected the co-pastor of New Life Church. And now, as the last order of business, in the new bylaws, we have in here that there is a 3-year kind of probationary period. And I would move for a voice vote to drop that requirement for Pastor Tina, since she's been here for 15, 16, 17 years. I personally do not think that is necessary. So, Randy, I will make a motion to drop the 3-year requirement. We have a second. Walter. Any further discussion? Harry? It will. This is just for Pastor Tina. Any additional co-pastors will be on the 3-year probationary period. Okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor, aye? Aye. Those opposed, same sign? Carried.
Want to give a speech, Tina? I was going to shout out opposed. I wanted to have her on probation for a while, but I still got to go home later. So it was just, But if you could be praying for Pastor Tina, since she's had COVID, she has asthma, and since COVID, it's messed with her asthma, and so she's coughing a lot. So be praying for her to feel better, and praying for me to be able to sleep at night when she's coughing. So no, it's I know it's well worn. Yeah, she said, "Well, you can go downstairs if you want." I'm like, "No." But keep her in prayer for that. We're moving to the last item of official business, which is to certify the votes and destroy ballots. And so we need a motion to do that. We don't want ballots just to continue to follow the records and that kind of stuff. Don't need them. So we need to have a motion. Okay, so Scott Johnson moved. Second by Lee Harris. Any discussion or questions? All in favor, aye. Opposed, same sign. All right. Thank you. That is our meeting. We need a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn, Scott Shirk. Second, Vonnie Hovland. All in favor can stand up and leave whenever you want to, and if you want to stay, you can.